Hey everybody, welcome to the next video. We're getting pretty close to installing a database and some tools and doing some stuff here. First thing though, for where we're going to get to next, if you're a Windows user, there's a couple of extra steps you got to go to. Thankfully, in this day and age, you don't have to go through partitioning your hard drive and installing another operating system and rebooting into a different OS to do any of this stuff. You can install Linux within Windows 10. So if you got Windows 10, I'll put the link to this documentation from Microsoft in the video description. This is pretty easy stuff. You just copy this command, open up a PowerShell as an administrator. So pull up PowerShell, right click, run as administrator. When you get a PowerShell open, paste the command and run it. After it is installed, you will need to reboot. And once you have rebooted, you can go into the store, search for Ubuntu. It's the version of Linux we're going to use. 20.04 long-term support is the one we want. And just click install. Apparently I'm getting an update. Yeah, click on install. It'll take a few minutes. It's about a 500 meg download. When it's finished, open it up. It will ask you for a username and password, which you can set to whatever you want to be. And then you should have this green command line. Once you get into the green command line, there is a tool you need to install that we are going to use for deploying things on a remote server called Ansible. So installing things in Ubuntu is pretty easy. Sudo, which is the equivalent of running as an administrator in Linux. apt is the program that Ubuntu and Debian and all other Debian variants provide to install software with. Actually, we need to update first. So sudo apt update. It will ask you for your password. And make sure you've got the most recent list of available software from the distribution servers, and then sudo apt install Ansible. It will tell you what you need, including all dependencies. Do we want that? Y for yes. And while we're going here, I know people are probably looking at this and scratching their heads saying, wait a minute, I thought we were going to build apps without any custom handwriting of code and without any command line. Mostly, yes. The catch with that is, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, we still need deployment tools. You can build whatever apps you want, but you have to put them somewhere, and presumably you're going to put them on some cloud services server that's not in your home or your office. So there are very clever and useful automatic deployment tools. Ansible is one of the more prevalent ones. That's the one that I'm going to use and we're going to use for all the examples here. But the catch is Ansible is a Linux or Mac only command line utility. It can install to a Windows server, but as a host machine, rather than a target machine, it can only be a Mac or Linux command line. So even though we can reduce a complicated database and web app, phone app, and all associated tools, deployment down to typing a couple of words, you still need a command line to type the words in. So, hopefully we will be finished here in a second. And there we have it. Ansible's installed, and we're ready to go. The only other tools we'll use on the Linux command line, Git for working for GitHub repositories, already included. wget for downloading things, that's already included. So now you've got everything you need on Windows. So just pin your Ubuntu to the taskbar so you can click on it and run it whenever you need, and we're ready to go. Hey everybody, now that we've got the Windows users set up, let's talk about what we're going to get into. We're to the point where we can go ahead and set up a database and start doing some stuff. But for us to accomplish that, you guys are going to need a server. Presumably you don't have a spare server sitting unused in your house or in your office. If you do, this may be redundant, but for everybody else, we're going to need to get one. And presumably, if you don't have one, you're going to rent one from one of the cloud services out there. So this is what we're going to set up, a nice graphical tool that allows us to create databases, edit databases, drag and drop tables with a nice interface where you can just fill in and connect things graphically. But we got to have a server to put this on. So there's a couple of things we need. First of all, you need a name. The catch with setting up a server is all the traffic to and from it needs to be encrypted. If it's not, you may as well not have passwords on your data, because anybody could look at whatever you send across the wire. So if you have a domain name you want to use, that's fine. If not, DNS seems to be the preferred free DNS service these days. And what you can do with this if you sign up for it is, after you've signed up and logged in, this is... the address is duckdns.org, and you'll be able to create an address underneath duckdns, something like this, some random string of characters. It doesn't matter if it's an ugly name. This is just for connecting to your database on the back end of whatever application you build. So nobody's ever going to see this ugly address but use it. It doesn't matter how ugly it is. Once you've done that or set up a subdomain on a domain name that you already own, the next thing is we need a server somewhere. And there's about 4 common options as far as low-end cheap server rental. I'm sure everybody's familiar with Amazon and Google's cloud platforms. On AWS, if you've never had an AWS account, when you sign up for a new one, you get a list of services that they offer kind of on the low end of the spectrum in terms of limits and performance that are free for a year. And one of those is EC2. That's what Amazon server rental service is called. And for EC2, you get a T3 micro free for a year, which, let's scroll up and find it. A T3 micro is 2 processors, 1 gig of memory. You get 30 gigs of free storage across your account for that free tier for a year. And the catch with Amazon, though, is that while the server is going to be on the free tier, bandwidth is not. You get 1 gigabyte of free transfer every month. After that 1 gigabyte free, it's 9 cents per gigabyte. And that is not very cheap, to be honest. Since we're setting up a database and presuming we're going to be having multiple users on that database at some point, it's going to be sending some data. So 1 gigabyte's not going to get it, and 9 cents per gigabyte is not inexpensive. On Google, they do things a bit differently, but similar. When you sign up for Google's cloud platform, if you've never used it before, you get a $300 credit to use anytime during the first year. And they also have a free tier of rented servers. The Google Cloud Platform's free server is quite a bit less in terms of performance than Amazon's is. I believe it's a little more than half of 1 gigabyte of RAM in one processor, or even less than a percentage of one processor. But most importantly, on Google, the data transfer is also not free, and it's even more expensive than Amazon is. It's 12 cents per gigabyte, and even more than that if you have a user that is in Australia or China, for example. So Google's selling point is that you're paying more for their premium network. That's not necessary for our learning purposes, and in my opinion, not necessary at all. So I personally don't use Google's platform for this reason. The data transfer is just too expensive. 2 other choices: Linode and DigitalOcean, which you may not have heard of. They do things a bit differently. In the case of Linode and DigitalOcean, they don't have much of any free options. When you sign up for either DigitalOcean or Linode, you'll probably get a $20 or $40 credit that's good for a couple of months that you can use. So you might get a month or 2 for free. Usually with DigitalOcean, you go and find a coupon code when you sign up, just like you were using a coupon code from, Groupon or something like that. With Linode, I believe they give you a $20 credit as soon as you sign up. They did when I signed up initially. And on the low end, there's nothing free. So the cheapest option is $5 per month, but 1 TB of transfer, 1 TB is 1,000 gigabytes. So 1,000 gigabytes of data transfer is included every month in the $5 on the low end. And that included amount goes up as you need more of a server. So when you get up to lots of users and say you need a server with 16 gigs of RAM and 6 processors, well, yeah, the server is $80 a month, but you get 6,000 gigs of data transfer included with that. And Linode pretty much mirrors this. So they do it the same way. The more, on the $5 tier, you get 1,000 gigs. And as you go up, you get more free transfer. or more included transfer in the price of the server. This is a much more fair way of doing this, in my opinion. I like this a lot better than paying Amazon or Google by the gigabyte for data transfer. So if you're going to follow along with me, personally, I like DigitalOcean because they have a very good website with a very simple and easy to use interface, which is a big plus. All this stuff is as complex as you want to make it, so a nice, well-designed website and user interface helps a lot for setting up complex things. So I'm going to go with DigitalOcean. Another reason I like them is they consistently have higher hard drive performance on their rented servers than other cloud services do. A lot higher than the low end of Amazon and Google, and a little higher than the others. And for databases, processors don't matter a whole lot in terms of databases performance. A database's performance compared to memory and hard drive speed matter a lot more. So DigitalOcean's good hard drive performance also gets a big plus. So let's go ahead and set up a DigitalOcean server. When you first log in to DigitalOcean, it'll prompt you to create a project, which you'll have to go through. Do that. And then you want to go to the settings on your account, and I'm going to walk you through setting up SSH keys, which is a basic thing that anybody running a server will need to do. So when you get into this security tab on the settings section of your account, there'll be a section here, add SSH key. Click on that button. It'll give you instructions, but what we need to do is open up a terminal on your Mac, and if you're a Windows person using Linux inside of Windows, this is going to be exactly the same. So you're going to start out in your home folder, and from your home folder, we want to cd change directory to .ssh. This is going to be the same on the Mac as it is on Windows. And you can type ls to list the contents of your SSH folder. These are all the saved encryption keys for logging into remote servers that I have. I see a couple of extraneous ones. rm-rf is delete right now. We're going to delete that one. And as it says here, the command you want to run is ssh-keygen. And it's going to ask you a couple of questions. First, what you want the file name of the encryption key to be. I don't want ID underscore RSA. That's the default. So let's call it DOSSH for DigitalOcean SSH. A passphrase will add another password on top of the encryption key, and that's not necessary. We don't need that. So hit enter twice with that blank to skip that. And we have our key called DOSSH, and then a public key called DOSSH.pub. And we need the pub version of that. So to list the contents of that key, cat, like concatenate, is the command, cat DOSSH.pub. That's our public key that we need to copy and paste. So copy this beginning with SSH-RSA down all the way through your computer's name. Right click and copy. And then in the website, right click and paste. And we'll name it the same thing so we can keep track of these. DOSSH and add key. And it'll tell you the key is created successfully. And now we're going to create a droplet. I'm going to destroy this stray one I've got in here real quick. And this is what you'll see when you create a new server on DigitalOcean. They call them droplets. So create a droplet. And we're going to pick Ubuntu again and 20.04 long-term support again under this menu. Under our pricing choices here, we're going to click on the first dot to go all the way down to the cheap tier. $5 a month server is fine for our testing and development purposes. The 25 gigabytes of hard drive space is included in the server, so you don't need to add block storage. If you do, it'll add another hard drive to the server, basically. We don't need to do that. You can choose whatever data center is closest to you. I'm equal distance from New York and San Francisco, so I'll leave that at New York. VPC is for connecting over a private network to other DigitalOcean services. We're not going to use that on this server, so we can leave that blank. We don't need IP version 6, so we can leave that blank. And we want to select the encryption key that we just created before as the login key for this server. We're just going to create one. For the host name, you can give it the name that you created before over here at Duck DNS if you like. That's the proper way, particularly if you're sending email, but we're not going to be sending any email from a custom email server or anything, so that's not as big a deal. You can leave that as it is. Tags, you can add little descriptive tags to servers if you have lots of them in your account to help you sort them. We don't, so we can leave that blank. As for adding the backups, the only thing we're really concerned about adding a backup for is the database. We can do that ourselves, so we don't need to pay DigitalOcean to back up the server either. And that's it. Just hit create droplet. And it will work on this for a minute. While it's working on that, we need to set up a saved connection to this server on our end. And again, this is the same on Windows if you're running Linux inside of Windows or on a Mac. Nano, which is the command line text editor, and the file we want to edit is called config, still in our SSH folder. For Windows people, surely I would think the Windows Ubuntu install has Nano installed. If not, you can do sudo apt install Nano just like you did before on Ansible to install it. So let's set up our server here. Host can be whatever you want the name to be. This is what you're going to type when you log in. This is like a shortcut name. So we'll call this DODB for DigitalOcean Database. Host name is going to be the IP address that DigitalOcean gave your server. So copy that and paste. Identity file is going to be the key we set up, and it's in our home folder, which is the tilde /.ssh /DOSSH is the name of the key that we typed earlier. So that's the encryption key to log in with. And on DigitalOcean, the user that you log in with by default is the root user, which is the same as administrator on Windows. This menu at the bottom is actions that you can do with your keyboard. In Nano, the up arrow represents control, so we go to Control X for exit. It's going to ask you, do you want to save? Hit Y for yes, and the file name is config. So at this point, we can just type sshDODB. It's going to ask, do you want to save this server's encryption fingerprint to your trusted servers file? Say yes. And we're logged in. And all the commands from the command line remotely are going to be pretty much the same as they are on a Mac 99% of the time. We can go CD to change to the root folder and hit LS to list, and there's everything on the server. When you're done doing whatever you need to do, you can just type exit and it will close the connection. That's pretty much it. Now we've got a server up and running, and we have a name that we're going to point that server to. So last but not least is go back to your DNS, whether you're using DuckDNS or some other DNS service on your own domain name, and put that IP address for your DigitalOcean server as an A record on your DNS. That will point this name to that IP address. That's how DNS works. And that's it. Now we're up and running. We got a server with a name. And in the next video, we will deploy a web server and a database and some database tools and get to work on some stuff. That's it. See you in the next video.